Mr. Speaker.
Denise Roche.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rangatirama, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's a pleasure to speak on behalf of the Greens on the Ngati Koata, Ngati Rarua, Ngati Tama, ki te tau ihu and te Atiawa o te Waka a Maui Claims Settlement Bill. I maintain that it is a privilege to speak on these bills, and I want to thank the iwi who are here today because this was the first settlement bill that I've been involved with where I have travelled to the actual area where the land claims were from. And I did that with the Select Committee, and it was the first time that I had actually heard in the rohe from the people who lived there while we were surrounded by the beautiful land, while we were surrounded by the losses that these people had endured. That was the first time that it had happened for me, and so the weight of those submissions actually carried much more for me because I was there and because it was kanohi ki te kanohi. So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge there are many people over the very many generations who have worked to bring these treaty settlements to legislation today. And I want to particularly acknowledge those who have passed away on the journey to here. And I want to acknowledge their foresightedness and their tenacity to bring justice to their people. Mr. Speaker, this bill puts into legislation the settlements that were signed with each of the four iwi. Ngati Koata signed on the 21st of December 2012. Te Atiawa o te Waka o Maui signed a deed of settlement on the 21st of December as well. Ngati Rarua signed theirs on the 13th of April 2013. And Ngati Tama ki te tau ihu signed theirs in April 2013 as well. Now, each of these iwi have separate and specific histories. However, they share a similar fate, and that is why they're here today. Ngati Koata, Ngati Rarua, Ngati Tama, and Te Atiawa have areas of occupation and areas of interest that overlap, but they are distinct for each, and te tau ihu o te Waka o Maui. In 1839, and this is the common history, they were all caught up in the dodgy deal that was done by the New Zealand Company when the New Zealand Company purported to have bought the entire top of the South Island in 1839. And then after the treaty was signed a year later, and leaders from these iwi did sign the treaty, the Crown appointed a commissioner to investigate the company's purchases. In Ngati Rarua's settlement, it says that in Nelson, the commissioner heard from only one Māori, and that person was Ngati Rarua, before suspending the entire inquiry to enable the New Zealand Company to attempt to negotiate a settlement. And local Māori signed deeds of settlements in return for accepting payments that were described as gifts rather than as payments for the land. It's fair to say that the New Zealand Company, in its attempts to wrest land from iwi, negotiated with individual Māori for land ownership, when in fact land was owned collectively. And breaking that collective ownership is basically how the land was alienated from iwi by both the New Zealand Company and also subsequently by the Crown. And the Crown has continued to do that. It did continue. It used a variety of mechanisms, and they're outlined fully in each of the deeds of settlements and each of the acknowledged histories that are contained in the legislation. And to read those accounts, to understand the huge injustices that occurred where iwi were forced out of ownership of their resources, their economic base, is so incredibly sad. I just want to give an example of those acknowledgements from the Te Atiawa conclusion. It says, within 3 decades of Te Atiawa rangatira signing the Treaty of Waitangi at Tōtaranui, extensive Crown purchases into Tau Ihu had left Te Atiawa o te Waka o Maui virtually landless. The small areas of reserve land left to Atiawa were insufficient for Te Atiawa to participate in the new economy and were subject to further alienation over the 20th century. The loss of land has impacted on Te Atiawa's connection and access to many of their significant sites and resources, and this has had a detrimental effect on the spiritual, economic and cultural well-being of Te Atiawa as an iwi. Mr. Speaker, iwi have carried these injustices and have been hurt by them for generations, and so I'm aware that the apologies from the Crown are really important, and I acknowledge what the previous speaker, Nanaia Mahuta, said there. The apologies are crucial to healing those hurts, and when I read the apologies that are in the law, the legislation, I can see that care has been taken. Maybe the words were crafted and debated by the negotiation team, but they've been crafted to ensure that the Crown's apology is sincere and unflinching in accepting responsibility for its actions and its omissions that disadvantaged the iwi. And I'm going to quote from the Rarua apology, which I think the previous speaker may already have done, but I think it's worth repeating as an example of that unflinchingness. The Crown is sorry that its actions rendered Ngati Rarua virtually landless in their rohe. This had a devastating impact on the social and cultural well-being of the people of Ngati Rarua that continues to be seen today. The Crown also accepts that the loss of their land and their restriction to inadequate reserves has significantly marginalised Ngati Rarua from the benefits of economic development and limited autonomy and ability of the iwi to exercise customary rights and responsibilities throughout the Ngati Rarua rohe. Mr. Speaker, I maintain that to accept the apology is an act of huge generosity from these people. To be sure, the redress has been outlined in the legislation as well, and iwi have managed to secure from the Crown some financial and cultural and commercial redress, but in no way are the losses that have been suffered covered by what is in the legislation, by what has been negotiated. Ngati Koata will get financial redress of $11.76 million and the opportunity to purchase Waimea and Hera forestry land near Nelson. Ngati Tama ki te tau ihu receives financial redress of $12.06 million. Te Atiawa financial redress is $11.7 million, and Ngati Rarua, their financial redress is $11.7 million. And as I pointed out in the previous speech, this is a drop in the bucket compared to what this government sometimes spends its money on, and I refer to the Southern Finance Investment Company. All the iwi get small parcels of land back, but nowhere near what was lost, and they symbolically give some of that land back to the people of New Zealand. For example, Te Tai Tapu and Kaka Point will be given to iwi, but will be gifted back to the people of New Zealand 7 days later. Mr. Speaker, the Greens don't agree that these are full and final settlements, and it's a political point that I need to make in every speech and every settlement. It's not full because the compensation is obviously not full, and it's not final because how can we know now how the histories of these iwi will impact on their people in the future? Without a doubt, Mr. Speaker, someone out there in the public will say that this is a gravy train, that Māori are privileged. It is my incredible wish that those people will receive the true histories of these, of the tangata whenua of Aotearoa New Zealand, and that is the only way we will break down racism. Today is the day to celebrate, Mr. Speaker. I join with the rest of the House in congratulating the people whose legislation will pass through finally. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Koret hauiti.
Nā mihi ki a koutou katoa. Te iwi o Ngati Koata,